Waiting for a green light here, folks, and we'll be Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 19, 2012 meeting of the Edina City Council and the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Roll call, please, Ms. Mangan.
Member Bennett?
Here.
Member Brindle?
Here.
Member Sprague?
Here.
Member Swenson?
Here.
Mayor Hovland?
Here. Next matter before us is the approval of the meeting agenda. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
A motion and a second to approve the form of meeting agenda before us this evening. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. And then we have the adoption of the consent agenda. Is there anyone on the council that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? I'm going to remove these work session minutes, September 4, 2012. Other than those work session minutes, nothing else to remove. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the balance of the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded, we adopt the consent agenda with the exclusion of the work session minutes of September 4, 2012. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed say nay. Carried. With regard to those minutes, on page 1 under the caption Hillcrest Development Pentagon Park Plans, I just wanted to add the word potential before the word redevelopment, because he did not discuss redevelopment, just the potential for redevelopment. And then on the back side, 3 lines down, after the word master developer, we should interlineate the word and then 2 lines down from that, the word need should be the word needed. And then I believe small area plan should be, those words should be capitalized. With those changes, I would move those minutes.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. All right. We have no special recognitions or presentations this evening. And we're going to move right into the public hearing portion of the agenda. And the first matter before us this evening is the appeal of a variance at 5,000 Schaefer Road. And Ms. Ocker, you're going to handle this matter for us from a staffing standpoint, and then we'll bring the appellant up.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, the request is an appeal of a front yard setback variance granted by the Planning Commission on August 22nd, 2012 for property located at 5,000 Schaefer Road to allow a garage stall and mudroom addition to the subject home that will be further back from interlocking than the existing garage. The subject property is a corner lot. It is in the southwest corner of the intersection of Schaefer Road and Interlochen. The subject property is owned by Daniel Wagner and Lindsay Garrity. It's a corner lot located just south of Interlochen. It is a rambler that faces Schaefer Road, although the garage fronts off of and loads off of Interlochen. The subject home was built in 1954. The property is subjected to 2 front yard setbacks. It's subjected to the setback of the property to the west that is directly west of it, which is 122.6 feet back from Interlochen. The neighboring property to the south at 5,000 Schaefer Road is about even with the subject property. So there aren't any setback issues along Schaefer, it's just along Interlochen. Here's a number of photographs illustrating the existing conditions of the site. What you'll notice is the upper left-hand photograph shows the garage, the sidewall of the garage if you're standing in the south or in the northeast corner of the subject site. The garage is actually at a lower elevation than the main floor of the Rambler. You can see from this angle, this would be if you were looking from Interlochen at the garage. The addition actually would be beside or to the west of the existing garage. It would consist of a single stall with a mudroom behind. Again, two more views of the property. The lower right-hand photograph shows the subject property if you were standing on the property to the west, looking to the side wall of the garage where the new garage stall would go, along with the mudroom behind.
Would you
This
go
is
back
a-
there, Ms. Zucker? Would you go back to that photo, please? On photo F, then, is that taken from the property to the west?
I believe so.
The appellant's property?
Yes, I did not take the photographs, but I believe so. This would be if you're standing looking west.
So you think that's Ms. Fruchtman's property?
I believe so.
Okay. All right, thank you.
This is a current survey of the property, and it shows the existing house, again, fronting Schaefer Road with the garage loading off of Interlaken, the proposed addition, which is a 12-foot wide garage, adjacent to it, to the west of the garage with the mudroom behind. You'll notice the deep setback of the house directly to the west, that's 122 and a half feet back. The line that you see here, this dashed line, actually indicates the required setback for the property. So this box area here is the buildable area of the lot. So the about half of the house is overlapping into the required setback. The house to the west was actually built a year after the subject home, which in effect then dictated the setback along Interlaken Road. This is the lower level plan, the basement plan. Again, the existing garage to the right. This is if you were looking at it from Schaefer Road, so north is to the right, south is to the left. In the upper area here would be the garage addition with the small mudroom behind. The garage on, this would be the main floor. The garage is at a lower elevation, so they need stair access up into the mudroom to get into the main floor, that main floor of the Rambler. Here are the elevations that are being proposed from the east. The east elevation really doesn't change very much. The west elevation, there's going to be an addition of a garage stall adjacent to the existing garage stall. Actually, the front corner of the existing garage is closer to Interlaken than the proposed garage. Behind that, you see the small mudroom addition, and then the view from the west, or the west elevation of the new addition, the garage here, and then the small mudroom behind. On August 22nd, 2012, the Planning Commission voted 6-1 to approve the variance request. Approval was based on the following findings by the Planning Commission. With the exception of the variance requested, the proposal would meet the required standards and ordinances for the R1 single dwelling unit district. The proposal would meet the required standards for a variance because the proposed use of the property is reasonable as it is consistent with the surrounding properties, is further from Interlaken than the nonconforming setback that has historically been provided by the existing garage. The imposed setback limits design opportunity. The intent of the ordinance is to provide adequate spacing between structures and the street. Spacing will not change from Interlaken. Actually, the addition will be further back and away from Interlaken. The unique circumstance is the original placement of the home relative to the neighbor's home, which was constructed a year later than the subject home. On September 4th, 2012, Dina Allen Fruchtman, who lives to the west at 6405 Interlaken Boulevard, submitted an appeal to the Planning Commission, an appeal of the Planning Commission's variance approval. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Ms. Zucker, Member Swenson?
If there was not a house on 5,000 right now, and they came in to build on it, it's a buildable lot by our standards as far as its frontage, et cetera. Would they have to go through a variance process to even build on it? Because basically by building houses later next to it that set back so far from the street, there is maybe a 10-foot by 20-foot slice of land that doesn't need a variance that could be built on it, correct?
Right. It's a small area that, I mean, it's much smaller than the size of the lot. You'd expect you'd have much more opportunity to build a house on the property.
So would we allow someone to build on it if there were no house on it today?
They could build a house. It'd be much smaller, I think, than what you'd expect you could build on it. It's a small, because of the 122-foot setback, and then you have a 60 some odd setback from Schaefer Road.
And we have a 25
And a
foot
25 foot rear
backyard
yard and a
setback
10
and
foot.
and
Yeah.
they, and
It would be
the,
small.
so, more than very small. Okay.
Member Brindle and then
Thank you.
Member Bennett.
I guess what I'm looking at is, we've had a situation, I think, in another area of Edina, it's been a little while, but we had a non-conforming screen porch, and the owner wanted to add to that side of the house. And it's my understanding that the line from that non-conforming screen porch became the line that that homeowner needed to work within. And I'm looking at this similarly. So what we have is the corner of the garage that's 76 feet from Interlochen, and then coming back, the proposed addition is greater than 76 feet from Interlochen, but it still is not, it's non-conforming based on the setback of the house to the west.
That's correct.
Okay, so I'm looking at, all right, so looking at the fact that we have a non-conforming garage, if we stay behind that line, then we can use that space and put that addition there by virtue of the fact that we stay behind the line of the current nonconformity. Am I interpreting that correctly?
You are.
Okay. So what I guess I'm looking at, if that is correct, then the need for this variance is the fact that this addition is greater than 200 square feet.
That's correct. Well, they've already gotten a permit for an addition. It's actually smaller than 200 square feet for the family room behind it. But they wanted to, in addition to that, add in a garage stall and have a mudroom that would access the main floor to the garage. Right now, that setback from Interlochen bisects the house. Half of the house is non-conforming. So their opportunity to try to design a plan that makes sense is really difficult, especially given the fact where the garage is. They really can't do much with it.
Okay. Let's see. Just by my notes, I want to make sure that I've asked my question. The proposed use as a mudroom is allowed on that addition in the back. And, okay, those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Member Bennett
Thank you.
and Member Sprague.
Ms. Ocker, if you could bring up again the slide or aerial depiction map, survey map, showing the setback that this property is subject to. Yes, and just to reiterate, this home at 5,000 Schaefer Road was built first,
Yes.
before its neighbor to the west, correct?
That's correct.
At the time it was built, what was the required setback from Interlochen?
Well, it depends. If it would have been a side street, if there would be no homes fronting Interlochen at the time, they could actually treat it as a side street. It would be a 15-foot setback or 20 feet for a garage opening. If they were fronting and considering it a front yard setback, it would be 30 feet.
And the setback is?
70.
Their current setback is 76 point.
So in other words, fully in conformance at the time that
At
it
the
was
time,
built.
absolutely.
Well over
Yes.
conformance at the time it was built. It only became out of conformance when the property was built to the west.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Member Sprague.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I bring up the overhead shot for a second that shows the neighbor's house to the west? So that, where your mouse clicker is right there, that's part of the west structure. Is that living quarters or is that garage?
That is their garage.
Okay, so that's not a room looking out directly onto the back of this house?
I don't believe so. I haven't been in the house. I do know that there's a front room perhaps beside the garage that they can,
But that structure where the driveway comes in is not, it's just a garage.
it's a garage.
Okay, and then there's no issue with the side yard setback with the addition, correct?
No.
Okay, so what's the required setback and where are they?
Ten foot setback.
25 and 45.
It's, yeah, the required side yard setback is 10 feet, and the rear yard setback is 25, and they're, I think,
Or 10,
45 feet.
10.
And they're at,
11 and a half.
45,
okay, so they're
Are they
within
too
that
low?
as well.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
What's the, do you know the height to the ridge line of the existing garage?
I do not.
And the, as proposed, it's 20 feet to the ridge line.
I think they're matching, they're not, it's not getting any higher. It's, the garage itself is lower than the main floor of the house, so it's,
And they would be allowed 2.5 stories and 35 feet to the ridge line.
yes.
Okay. Any other question for Ms. Ocker at this point? Okay. Let's bring Ms. Fruchtman up here, and
She could scream.
the appellant or someone who represents Edina Fruchtman. Thank you. And is Ms. Fruchtman here? No, the appellant is not here? Okay. How about Mr. Wagner or Ms. Garrity? I bet somebody in the audience would watch that baby for you. I think Lisa will keep an eye on the baby.
I'm Dan, and this is Lindsay, and we appreciate your time, and I think you have, I had a great presentation from Chris and Carrie as well. You know, they're a great team. I think you also have all the information that was submitted by both our neighbor as well as ourselves, and documentation that supports, you know, our position on this, and just appreciate your consideration, your time, and certainly hope that, you know, this is going to be something you view as good for the city of Edina, instead of us, you know, trying to tear the house down and build something, you know, in that space that either wouldn't have worked or potentially would have been, we would have been in the same place asking for a variance for a much larger home.
No, I would just say that I think several neighbors, other neighbors who are in favor of the work that we're doing have sent letters in and just expressed their favorability with it versus, you know, one person who's not pleased with it. So I just wanted to highlight that as well.
Thank you.
Happy to take any
Questions for Mr. Wagner or Ms. Garrity? Do you happen to know the height of the existing ridge line on the garage? Your existing garage?
Chris, you had a plan that showed the elevations on your slide. Could we pull that up maybe? I might have it in. I think it was towards the end, yeah. If I step away and just look at
That only gives you the wall.
No.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to answer
Okay.
that
Well,
factually.
do you know whether the new garage will be taller than the,
No. It's, I mean, the third stall is intended to be sort of a smaller, it's set back about a foot and a half from the existing line, and it's intended to be smaller with the, and just tie into the current structure. It actually saves us money not to have to tear off the existing roof and just tie it in, so we're not going bigger.
okay. Any other questions? No. Folks, anything else? We're
No,
going
just appreciate your
to open
time.
this up for a public hearing now.
Thank
So
you.
stand by, don't leave yet.
No, you can sit down, but
Yeah.
don't leave the building.
Yeah, don't, stay where you can hear us and hear anyone that wants to testify. I'm going to open this matter up for a public hearing. Is there anyone that wishes to come forward and inquire or comment with the council regarding this matter? All right. Hearing nothing and seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Moved and seconded, we close the public hearing. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Carried. Member Swenson.
I'll move the variance for 5,000 Schaefer Road based on all of the findings from the Planning Commission and the Planning Department.
And all those the variance embodied in Resolution 2012-108.
Yep.
Are you moving denial of the appeal or the variance itself?
I'm moving denial of the appeal or upholding the variance. Which way would you like me to state that?
Let's deal with the appeal first.
If I deny the
Let's do
appeal,
two
then the variance
motions.
stands, correct?
Yeah, so it's denial of the
We still
appeal.
need to adopt a resolution.
You'd be
I believe.
adopting a resolution approving the variance.
Yeah, so let's deal with the first.
Okay.
Let's deal with the appeal first.
I'll make a motion denying the appeal.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded, we deny the appeal of Ms. Fruchtman. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Carried. Manager Neal.
I think at this point I should introduce you to our city attorney tonight. This
I looked over there and I thought, who's that guy?
This is not Roger 30 years ago. This is Soren Maddock, and he is with the Campbell Knutson firm. Roger has a less important client tonight, so we get Soren at our meeting tonight.
So then I make a motion to uphold the variance.
Second.
Move to adopt the resolution.
Move to adopt the resolution to uphold the variance.
I will second that.
All right, so moved and seconded that we adopt Resolution 2012-108 approving a front yard setback variance at 5,000 Schaefer Road. Further discussion?
Yes, Your Honor. I just wanted to say the expansion is actually quite modest compared to what could have been done on the site with other variances, of course. But I think this is a classic example of a hardship that was not created by the parcel itself. Also, it's within the side yard setback, which to me is important, and it's also not really within the sight lines of the usable house space in the adjacent. I mean, you're basically, if you were sitting in your garage looking out the window, you'd see this, but from the front living quarters, you'd have to strain pretty hard to look that direction to see it and be bothered. So I think the impact is less.
Good, thank you. Yeah, we have a variance process for a reason, and this is a classic example of where it's appropriate, I think. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Good luck with everything. Thanks for coming in. The baby was just fantastic.
She just woke up.
Oh, all right.
Timing is everything.
Next matter before us, public hearing-wise, and our last public hearing of the evening is a vacation request for a portion of Natchez Avenue, Resolution 2012-109, and Director Houle has this matter for us. From a staffing standpoint, to introduce the topic.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight we have a public hearing for vacating a portion of Natchez Avenue. This was initiated by the homeowners or the property owners that own the property at 4166 Monterey Avenue, and they're actually in the audience tonight and actually will be presenting after I'm completed here. The property is located just north of 42nd Street, right off of Monterey Avenue. About what we'll be talking about is this portion of the where the arrow of the mouse is on Natchez Avenue itself. When they submitted the application to vacate, now they did something that was similar, a little bit or a lot more robust vacation request in July, and they've kind of narrowed it down to 3 different options that were in your packet. The first option, A1, is about a 22-foot width of Natchez Avenue. Natchez Avenue is actually 50-foot wide. This subdivision actually was platted in 1939, so I have no idea why they didn't complete the roadways of Natchez Avenue and 41st Street up to the north over the years. But what they're requesting on this one is 22-foot width on option A1. Option A2 is a 15-foot width. And then option B would be the outside of the radius of the corner of Monterey Avenue and Natchez Avenue. And they actually will be presenting the differences between the options and why they're requesting the different options.
Member Bennett?
Director Houle, just because I can see this question that some residents have raised, you're referring to option A1 A2 and B, but the notice that was mailed refers to options 1, 2, and 3. Could you make the correspondence, please? There's different numbering on the maps that are with the notice, but the cover of the notice, the text, actually has references to 1, 2, and 3.
This would
so
be...
to go forward, can you?
Yeah, Councilmember Bennett, the option A1 would be 1, and option A2 would be 2, and then option B would be 3. What I was following was actually their memo that they had in the packet. I didn't realize that there was other nomenclature here that was sent out. As with all vacation of right-of-ways or easements, we contact the different utility companies. CenterPoint and Excel has actually responded on this, said that they didn't have any utilities. The other utilities had responded earlier and said that they didn't have any utilities in this area of the easement. So we're taking that they have no objection to vacating this portion of Natchez Avenue. From a staff conclusion is that we looked at the comprehensive plan and we have no future need for the right-of-way. So with that, I'll leave it up to the council to, if you so desire, to go forward with the vacation. In the packet, and actually a revised resolution is in front of you tonight. That actually describes option 1 or option A1 to vacate. So if you elect to go with a different option or no option, we'd have to, other than A1 or option 1, we'd have to revise the resolution for you. But that'll take any questions you may have.
Questions for Director Houle at this point in time?
I do.
Member Brindle.
I'm looking at the resolution that was on the dais tonight, and I don't see, do you know where the changes are? I don't see any changes.
The changes, sure. Once I find it here, maybe Councilmember
okay.
Bennett can help.
In the fourth, okay, it's a grammatical change?
Yep. It's just an is from an are.
Okay, all right, I see. I was looking for numbers that changed or something. Okay, thank you.
It's in the right at the slope.
Okay.
The easement is not needed. On the original one, it was are not needed.
Got it.
Okay. Any other questions, Member Sprague?
Do you have an aerial?
Yes.
I just want you to, for the public, to go through on the aerial and note where the vacation is being requested, roughly.
Where they're requesting the vacation is the highlighted area here is the wider vacation. It's not to scale, but it's about midway. It's a 50-foot right-of-way, and they're requesting 22 feet would be the option A1.
And descriptively, so it's at the south end of the school park. Is that the school? And it's within the wooded tree buffer between the residential and the park.
That's right. It's actually in an unimproved right-of-way, so it's not actually part of the school park, but it's within a dedicated right-of-way.
And does that right-of-way run then westerly along the border of the park?
It does. It was platted, as I'm scrolling up here, Natchez actually runs north-south. It's a narrow right-of-way. That the other portion of the right-of-way was not platted in the St. Louis Park side, and then it goes up to 41st Street West, continues up where it is actually platted, going north towards 40th.
Can you go down south again? So to the west of that line is St. Louis Park, right to the west of the N in Natchez?
That's correct, yes.
And is that their right-of-way, or is that school property?
That's school property is this area here.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions for Director Houle, Member Swenson?
This is more for our city attorney, but I think if I'm not mistaken, the city has no way of selling a right-of-way, correct? But just vacating it?
That's correct.
Okay,
Once it's vacated, you'll file that resolution, and then the county will assign where the ownership goes. It's presumed that it'll probably get merged back into that property owner's land, but what your action here tonight is to vacate it,
okay.
record that resolution.
Okay. And then, Engineer Hool, if there weren't a school here, the whole reason it was platted so that, or that 24 is in your image right there that's on the screen, that would have been divided for housing, I assume, in another block, correct? If a school and a playground hadn't been there.
I would assume so, but I'm not sure why that was platted as a big open area
Okay.
back in 1939.
And then, could you tell me 4166, if we just squared it off, how many feet of frontage would they have? So that's option 3, I think? Yeah, B or 3, if we're double numbering.
They would, and I'm roughly guessing here, about 120 feet.
So,
Plus or minus
and if we
somewhere.
went the whole way, it would be somewhere under 150 feet?
It would be 130 feet.
If we did the, if we did the 22 plus the corner?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so about 130 feet. And currently, to have 2 lots there, they would need 150 feet?
That I don't know. I would refer that to Carrie T.
That's correct. They would need at least 150. Well, it's basically, it's determined by the median within 500 feet. I'm guessing the median is probably less than 75, so it would
That
be
was my guess
75.
based on
Right.
just a quick look around. Okay, thank you.
Can I clarify these numbers real quick?
Sure.
On option 1 or A1, the frontage would be 137.01. If you look at the surveys that are in the packet,
Yeah.
on the westerly right-of-way line, they're describing that. And then option 2 is 130.01 feet. And then option 3 would be 115-foot frontage.
Okay. Thank you.
Another question for the city attorney. If this vacation were approved in some iteration that's proposed, how do we go about valuing that property for purposes of enhancing the value of that property for property taxation purposes? Does that make sense? You know,
Yeah.
We're basically ceding property that we own to them. It seems to me that if we did that, you've created more value for them, less value for us. How do we capture that value in the form of enhanced or increased property tax?
I believe the assessor, the assessor's gonna have to catch that, sort of like anytime you do a regular home improvement, hopefully they understand something has changed. You record that resolution, which hopefully the assessor will catch. As far as what the city actually does, you're somewhat limited, but if the assessor sees the extra width, usually that's associated with an increased value. But it will be the assessor.
All right, thank you. Other questions for Director Hool or City Attorney at this point in time? All right, I'm going to bring the proponent forward, and let's take about 10 minutes to get their presentation. Mr. Samuel? Mr. and Mrs. Samuel?
Can either just scroll down. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Matt Samuel. Over here, I guess she was to my left a minute ago, is my wife Jennifer. And also here is Gabe Keller from the Peterson Keller architecture firm. He's going to handle a portion of this, and we will keep it within, we've been told 10 minutes. We'll keep it within that. First of all, thank you again for having us here. As you may, as we talked about, we are requesting that the city lifts part of its easement on the portion of Old Natchez Road that runs east to west between our lot at 4166 Monterey and the St. Louis Park Susan B. Lindgren School Playground. As was mentioned also, we were here a couple months ago with a broader joint request made with us in the city of St. Louis Park. There was a suggestion we come back with a more narrowly tailored request, and that's what we've done. And in addition, because we had a sense that perhaps the council would have different views on what was appropriate, if anything's appropriate, we have tried to give you some options here. So with that, let me go into the presentation. This is a picture from Monterey. These are actually two pictures. What I want you to see here, this is really the critical point. If you look at the topography of this lot, if you look to the right, first of all, if you look to the left, there is a yellow garage there. That is our neighbors. That is the Gambles. They have submitted an email to all of you. They strongly favor the 22-foot request. Let me now go to the next slide. I've panned to the right here. And it's this slope in the hill that's really the key that was really brought to our attention in terms of how we should build best by Peterson Keller. We're trying to use this topography so we can have a tuck-under garage that's accessed from the north. Now, I thought it would be helpful. Let me get this here. This slide was actually not in your packet. There were similar slides, but I wanted to start out simply by showing you what we own, that's the green, and where the easement is, that's the yellow. Now, I should be clear. My understanding is, and I'm not a real estate lawyer, but my understanding is we do actually own the portion of the yellow, but the city has a right, an easement on it. There was some confusion on that last time, and we submitted an opinion from a lawyer who is an expert on that. So that's what we're looking at. We've also put in here the setback lines for building. You can see those. This is the minimum request we're seeking with just that purple wedge highlighted. It's our sense, and we've done quite a bit of work at this point, that that's the minimum we would need to be able to have the driveway, which if you can see, this is the idea, to have the driveway come in like this, where that box is shown. That's the minimum we would need. Here is our preference. This is option A1. This is the 22-foot option. What it does is a couple things. It works best with the topography I showed you, and Gabe's going to talk about that in a minute. And it keeps us farthest from the neighbors on the south. There is a row of neighbors along here, all of whom I believe have submitted emails to you in support of this. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gabe.
Thanks, Mr. Samuel.
Good evening. My name is Gabriel Keller, and I'm the principal at Peterson Keller Architecture. And I'm the lead designer on the Samuels project. My partner Lars Peterson and I have been working for many years now on homes in Edina and Minneapolis, and especially around the lakes area. And really the focus of our work is on homes that are contextual and blend in with the surrounding urban fabric. And we've received several awards just for that in Minneapolis. Starting design for Matt and Jennifer's project, we worked with the landscape architect to evaluate the site and pretty quickly determined that we thought the best place for the garage was on that the northern side as a tuck under, but saw that we would need a vacation there to really make it work. Having the tuck under there, it really is a benefit for several reasons. The main one is, or one of the main ones, is that it reduces the overall mass and footprint of the house. By sliding it underneath the house, instead of being an attached garage, it really brings down the mass. Garages are a big driving force behind McMansions, I think, because of their size when they're attached. And in fact, the house that we're proposing now is 10% smaller. The footprint is 10% smaller than the house that sits on the site currently, or the house and garage that sit on the site currently. Another big reason is we don't have to do a front-facing garage. This is a frustration I often have, especially in Edina, and I know it's a contentious issue here. And it's really a detriment, I think, to a lot of houses, or it's almost never a benefit to have a large garage right in the front, whether it's a tuck under or not. So here, we really saw it as an opportunity to really focus the design and the architecture and the street presence on the architecture and have a very welcoming open front porch designed right now that you'll see. It also allows us having the tuck under there and locating it with the 22-foot vacation that is option A1 really allows us to minimize the need for any retaining walls. The further we move back, the more retaining walls are needed, and the size and scale of those retaining walls. And locating at other places on the site would make them quite large. And those retaining walls really, I think, again, bring focus and emphasis back to the garage and parking areas as opposed to the architecture and human-scaled elements of the home. And just, to look at one of the things we noticed as well is because it's an undeveloped right away. If you look at some of the other slides that I think the city engineer presented, if it was actually developed into a street, which I don't think is no longer possible, but that lot would have been squared off, and we could have brought the garage, the driveway, straight onto the street. So actually that curve that exists makes it a particular challenge to put a garage on that side of the street. So I think it's the 22 feet was really something we tried to balance the needs of the house and the site, what we thought was best for it with the interests of the city, and to really see how, what made the most sense, and that's how we came up to 22 feet. So I think it's an opportunity to really contribute to the neighborhood and do the best house for the site.
Mr. Keller, can you do the tuck under north loading garage with any three of those iterations? Any three of the options, yes. And I think that there's this scrolling through here. Matt, did you have this set up? Yeah, you can see. So here's one option. If we look here, this is option 3 or option B. This is actually with the
I would just.
Yeah, you should.
So this is option B. This is just the wedge, if you will. The retaining walls are bigger, and that's what we wanted to show you here. We think we could do it with option B, and that's where we'd be inclined to go still. But there will be significantly more retaining wall compared to option A1, which is here. Mm-hmm. That's really the key point about it. Mm-hmm. The further we can get to the north, the more we use that slope in the hill.
All right. And Mr. Samuel, thanks for the reminder on the letter from your attorney. That came a while back. Is the existing easement that the city has an impediment to a lender? I mean, in terms of borrowing money to help build your new house, is this a significant issue, or?
I think the answer to that's no.
No. Okay.
It hasn't been.
All right. Thank you. Other questions, Mr. Samuel?
I do.
Mr. Keller? Member Brindle?
Looking at the three options and the change that you just made between option A or option 1 and option B or option 3, it appears that the house moved to the south. Is that correct?
When we click to option B,
Yes.
it moves 22 feet to the south.
Okay.
That's what we were trying to show.
However, but what we have here between option A or option 1 and option B or option 3, the house doesn't move. In these survey schematics?
That was just an oversight on our part then. We just asked the surveyor to set up those three options. Really, the purpose of those pieces of paper is just to show the area of the easement.
Right, but that's my confusion, is understanding why the amount of vacation is needed when the wedge lets you do what you want to do. These three diagrams don't show me what's different about the use of the property between the three options.
Yeah, that survey
is that what
shows
it
the
is?
existing house. That's exactly right.
Okay.
The way I was trying to show what changes, let me click through here. This is what this was for. So this is option B, just the wedge.
Yeah.
And watch how the purple changes.
Right, right.
And we slid the house there too in this picture. And then in terms of seeing it in terms of the retaining walls, here's B. Mm-hmm. Now the next one, it's going to have slid 22 feet north. And that allows those retaining walls to be, it allows the retaining walls running east-west to not be necessary at all. We'll still need a little bit coming out just to shape the garage. But this is, it's really this, excuse me, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, so it's really this versus this. And we think this is the more aesthetically pleasing option. And as we've mentioned, numerous of the neighbors have supported us on this.
And that option is the one with the 22-foot vacation?
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Samuel, Mr. Keller, or Ms. Samuel? No? Any comment you wish to make? Member Sprague.
Just a quick question. So on the retaining wall, what's the height of the, it'd be the north retaining wall in option B?
In option B, the retaining wall, the maximum retaining wall, there's various heights as they step up as they step back to the house and as they step along the side property line. So they'd start out on one side, probably about 3 feet on the north side, and then step up as they go into the house. On the other side, probably starting at about 18 inches, and then stepping up as they go back to the house to the as they step back to the.
It looks like it goes to the top of the garages.
There's
Correct.
another
I mean,
view.
it goes
Yes.
up about 8 or 10 feet.
We've set the garage in and the house in as low as we possibly can, given the elevation of the street, so that water doesn't come into the side and into the home. So that's really how we pulled the house down, both to reduce the scale and then also to reduce the scale of the house more than anything. But that also then impacts the retaining walls.
Okay.
Okay, so to clarify that, so when you're moving to the north, option A1 or AB, are you saying the house elevation is changing?
No, the house.
The
no,
ridge
the
line's
house,
the same.
The house is the same.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to open this matter up now for public hearing and welcome anyone in the audience who has an interest in this matter to come forward, and we welcome your testimony. Unless you have an overhead that you want to use, we suggest you use one of the side podiums, and you will have 3 minutes. You'll see the yellow light go on when you have 30 seconds left. Please give us your name and address when you come up. Yes, sir. I think I remember you when we talked about this a few months ago. Come up to the side podium there, would you please? That's good.
I'm Garfield Clark. I represent the St. Louis Park School District. And mine is simply a question, is the way it's being shown now is that the north half of that street isn't being vacated. Does it make sense to vacate the whole street and allow that north portion to go into the district ownership? And I don't know the answer to the question, I just broach it. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Clark, would you give us your business address too?
Say it again, please.
Your business address?
I still didn't understand.
Your business address.
My business address is 1235 Yale Place, Minneapolis, 55403.
Thanks, Mr. Clark.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Welcome.
I'm back. Leanne Byro, I live at across the street, 4109 Monterey Avenue. And just interesting process watching this. Couple things that I think to think about are certainly that I look at the size of that lot, and it's a large lot, and the 3 houses that back onto it fill the width of it, and it seems like a good architect could figure out how to make that house work without the vacation, because it's so large. There's a lot of trees that'll be taken out, I'm assuming, when it's built. It's a very kind of wooded area now, which was, I know, a concern that came up last time when they mentioned they liked the wooded area and wanted it cleaned up, and I don't see any woods in there at that point. Also, across the street where I live, we have a lot of water problems when we have sump pumps, and our house is on peat. I don't know if that property is. It's very wet under there. So going down, just are they playing on sump pumps and where it's pumping out to? as well as with the slope, looking at that, in order to mow that slope or manage that slope as a front yard landscape-wise, wouldn't you need to retain it or bring it up anyway? Somehow block it so you could manage it better? I think that's all I'm going to say. It's an interesting process. I mean, they're going to be my neighbors, and I will welcome them to my neighborhood, but I still want to put my 2 cents in. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to testify? All right. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. We close the public hearing. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Who wants to lead out this discussion? It's an interesting one. Member Sprague.
I'd like to follow up on the resident's question with Director Hool. So can you talk about tree removal in the 3 vacation requests? Because I know that there's a tree buffer between that and the park. Are you aware of what will be removed in the 3 options?
You know, from an engineering perspective, is that we just look at the vacation of the right-of-way. We don't look at, in this case, we looked at the different options with the planning department, but as far as the tree removal, we didn't look at, you know, what's on the right-of-way, the unimproved right-of-way itself. So I really can't comment as far as the potential tree removal in that area.
Does the petitioner have an opinion on that?
Mr. Samuel, come on up.
I'd actually like to hear from, if the technical information, if you have that, or from the architect, whoever has the technical information about whether trees are coming out.
Okay, yeah, I can, and that's actually the reason I stood up a minute ago. So there are 2 6-inch or smaller trees that we believe will have to be removed for that driveway to come in like that. We've set it up this way, and in fact, we're trying to keep the house as far forward as we can. So all of the remaining trees in that woodsy area will stay. We are very sensitive to that. Frankly, that's why we bought the lot in large part. We love the woodsy feel. We have no intention. We think it's those 2 trees is all we need. There's a huge tree that we are going to tailor that driveway so it remains. It will be just beyond the end of the driveway as you come in.
So the thick tree buffer zone is beyond 1A to the north.
That's correct.
22-foot line.
Yeah.
That's
to
correct.
the north. Yeah.
That's correct. And I mean, I can add, it's been a huge point of contention in Morningside with some of the recent builds about trees being cut down. We've been in Morningside for many years. We're very sensitive to that. We have no intention of taking the trees. And even if you look where the house is going to sit, it's going to substantially overlay the existing house. There'll be the 2 trees, we think, for the driveway, and that should be it.
Thanks.
You would confirm that, Mr. Keller?
I'm sorry?
You would confirm that?
Yes, I would. Yeah, there's 2 trees on here that you see that he's referring to, and I think that on the survey they did everything over 6 inches. One is 8-inch diameter, the other one's 14-inch diameter. So those are beyond the reach of the driveway intentionally.
Thank you. Other questions for the proponent?
I do.
Member Brindle?
Looking at option B, and I think I'm asking the architect this question mostly, if you would, please. Thank you. Looking at option B, and in here, this is on a page where we're looking at a sky view of these 11 by 17s. Option B, site plan house shifted south is how it is identified with a bunch of call-outs to the right. Okay, that's good. I can use that one. All right, so I'm looking at the wedge idea, which is option B. And my question, I think, is to Mr. Keller as well as to Planner Teague, or Community Development Director Teague, and that is the driveway encroaches in the setback, in the north setback, is that allowable if we were going to look at option B?
We do not have a setback requirement for a driveway. so
Okay,
that would be
thank
okay.
you. And so looking at option B being the wedge idea, Mr. Keller, I'm looking at the amount of space just outside of the garage where the Samuels would back their cars out and then proceed out. We had a proposal before us, maybe just in our last meeting, about kind of a similar situation in another part of our city, and we were measuring what they needed there. And the builder mentioned 25 feet was the distance from the garage to the back of the auto port or parking pad, whatever you want to call it. What is the distance that we are looking at there? Is there 25 feet there?
There is, approximately. This isn't to scale here, but the width of the house, as we look right here, is 24 feet.
Okay.
So this is just beyond that. It could be 20, 26 feet. It's difficult
Okay.
for me to tell you exactly.
So
on the scale.
if we were to propose option B or option 3, you would be able to have the driveway entry, the side driveway entry into the tuck-under garage successfully?
That is correct. That's what we're showing here, yes.
Okay.
And
All right, and you've placed the house where ideally you want it?
I think ideally we'd like it what's shown in option A or option 1. This is I think a less ideal location for it, but it does work, but it requires additional retaining walls.
Oh, that's right, okay. All right, I guess my last piece could involve Mr. Clark. And that is, if we have no use for Natchez Avenue, do we have any future use for Natchez Avenue at all?
Councilmember Brindle, Council, to our knowledge, there was nothing identified in the comprehensive plan as far as future use of that right of way. Keep in mind is that the school does own lot 20, that's a number that's 24.
Right.
So if you ever would like to do a public walkway or something, east-west, either at 41st or the remainder portion of Natchez Avenue, you'd more than likely have to buy back that easement from the school if you're gonna, even though it is still a public entity, but you'd still have to get rights somehow from the school district if we were to give that up.
Just a reminder that the only thing in front of us tonight is a partial vacation.
Right.
We'd have to, if we had that notion, we'd have to notice it up and give everybody a chance to come
Okay,
in.
all right,
So I
thank
don't
you,
think
Mr.
we need
Clark.
I don't think you need Mr. Clark.
Okay.
Let me do say one thing, that the playground area now, which is bordered by a fence, a chain link fence on the south side, is actually encroaching into that right-of-way a little more than 50%. So at the moment, that is actually playground space beyond that line that's being proposed in A here. And then in B, you're talking about that lot backing right into a street if it were ever to be developed.
Right, okay, let me understand, and make sure I understand what you mean. In option A, which would be a 22-foot vacation, does that encroach on where the fence is on that playground?
The fence is yes, if you use that option A with the straight line in there, moving into the right-of-way, the fence is actually encroaching into that southernmost half at the moment.
Okay.
We can move it because it's just a corner over there if that should be the case. But it is now encroaching into that southern half.
Okay, well, that's just an interesting point to note. All right, thank you.
Mr. Samuel, come on up here and give us your quick perspective on this, and then we're gonna.
Just one point. Respectfully, I don't think that's correct. I think if we'd asked for the full 25 feet, the corner of that fence would have encroached. But I believe at the 22 feet, it doesn't. It doesn't run straight as with the line, but I don't think with 22 feet it does. It could, yeah.
All right, thank you. Let me ask the city attorney a question. in order to prevent a potential subdivision, I mean, we hear discussion about building a new house here. We approve option 1, gives them an extra 22 feet. Now, they may have enough property there to potentially subdivide it. Can you, by agreement, eliminate a request or prevent them from subdividing property by agreement that, in a way that runs with the land in perpetuity?
Not that I'm aware of, Mr. Mayor.
I didn't think so, that some council can't bind future actions.
No, especially in respect to this, what's before you is the request to give up your rights to those lands, to vacate that. And then at that point, once they have that land, the ordinance applies, and if they have enough land to subdivide, they would have it.
All right, thank you. Questions, Member Sprague?
I have no questions. I was just going to start discussion.
All right, go ahead and start it out.
This is an interesting one for sure. Much easier to evaluate without the school district issue before, so I appreciate that it's come back in this form, a narrower scope. There's a balancing act here. I think when we're in the stewardship role for lands held in the public trust, whether it's an easement or a fee owner, I think we have to be conservative in giving away public rights. We think we know what we want to do today, but that often changes. And I think Member Bennett can share an example of that. On the other hand, we want to allow for the rational redevelopment of these lots to accommodate modern needs. So how do we balance the two? I think the best house design is clearly without the retaining wall, but in this instance, with the public right-of-way having to be vacated, I think I'm leaning towards option B.
Which is the wedge.
Yes, and in any other instance, I mean, I think I would be leaning towards the best house design, but in this case, when we're in the stewardship model, I think I feel I have to be a little bit more conservative. But I would appreciate hearing Member Bennett's opinion and share the other experience as well.
Member Bennett?
Yes, thank you. Member Brindle actually raised the question in our work session earlier, which is, do we have an inventory of cow paths, ways to school, routes that get used for walking that don't necessarily need a roadway? And we don't have that inventory right now, and we know that in some instances we have given up. We either never had control of land or an easement on the land, or we've given up that easement without thinking of future needs that we are now starting to identify as we are planning more mindfully for pedestrians and bicyclists. And not just for vehicles as we've planned in the past. The example that I would give where I think there has been lost opportunity is in the previous packet where we had a plat view of the neighborhood as a whole and stretching west from Arbor Park. There remains a pathway at what was retained as right-of-way for 41st Street, except that in one instance, half a block is now gone. And if we as a city were to establish that created a route, that it provided safe passage and didn't put pedestrians in conflict with vehicles, we would need to pay to acquire that land. An example that I talked about when we discussed this last time was also trying to do some scouting for sidewalk and trail to connect to, for instance, Highland School. Mm-hmm. We know that we have, which is tangentially relevant, but the issue is the same, where because of lack of planning long range, it's now going to be very expensive for the school district and city to acquire those routes. And that's why, for me, transportation right-of-ways have a value beyond what we know them to have today. And at the same time, I do appreciate your comments about wanting to facilitate thoughtful and community-focused redevelopment, including residential rebuilding.
Member Swanson?
I could support B or number 3 for all the reasons that have just been given. It gets them It gets them a driveway that gets into a tuck-under garage. It squares off their property, and it doesn't make their property any wider. They enjoy a very nice wide lot. Actually, their width of their lot is about equal to the 2 lots straight across the street from them. And so I could support 3B, 3 or B, whatever we're calling it.
Member Brindle?
That certainly is the option that I came here ready to support. I kind of thought I would be in the minority, just because I thought we'd have a more varied opinion. But B seems to give them what they need without giving up any more than we have to. And I think the wedge is a piece that they will benefit greatly from having to allow them to build the house with the entry that they desire. I understand that it, in the design of where the house is on the property, it causes them to have increased height, if you will, increased elevation around that area with some additional retaining walls. And I guess I'll just add, we've had interesting discussions about retaining walls recently, particularly retaining walls that are 8 feet high, 10 feet high. And I would encourage you to possibly look at stepping back just slightly at about 4 feet or so, not only for design, but also just a sheer vertical face is something that I think you can do better from a design standpoint. And if you have the hill to cut into and give yourself some more landscaping interest along there, I think it would be more attractive. And in looking at the couple of examples of tall retaining walls we've seen recently, it would be kind of nice to have that just variation. So I would encourage that.
Thank you.
But B3 would be my preference, if I didn't make that clear. Thank you.
I like the separation from the property to the south created by option 1. But I think my colleagues have done a great job of analyzing this matter and have expressed in a very articulate way why we should go with the 3rd option. And I would support that as well.
So since the resolution's been drafted with A, do I move the adoption of the resolution to conform to option 3 or B? Is that satisfactory? So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Thank you. Thank you.
Happy home building.
All right, it is time for community comment. We have no other public hearings this evening. And welcome. You'll have 3 minutes, and you'll get that little yellow warning light when it's time to go. And please give us your name and address, and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Betsy Wolf. I live at 6221 Creek Valley Road. And I have a few comments about your resolution opposing the proposed voter ID amendment.
Ms. Wolf, I have to stop you.
Yes.
If you noticed on the agenda tonight, in the community comment portion, if there's anything on the agenda for the evening, it's not part of community comment. So
I'm sorry, I was here before, and my area of interest was passed without community comment. So will I have a chance to stand up at a later time to discuss this tonight?
this issue that you're raising now, or some other issue?
This issue, when can I discuss this?
No, you will not. We're going to discuss it in its normal place in the agenda.
Will I have a chance to comment?
No, you will not.
Is that
You will
Is
not
that
be allowed to-
democracy at
You are
work?
not allowed to comment on it because it's an item on the agenda tonight, and it's not a matter set for public hearing.
Well, then may I take my time to express my disappointment that my rights, my constitutional freedom to discuss this matter is not being accepted?
Mayor, if I may, the protocol for submission of comments on agenda items, you can submit a written comment, and I would be happy if you wanted to submit, as everyone else can, a written document for us to consider now. But we don't take public testimony on non-public hearings. Community comment is for non-agenda items. So that's just a protocol we have adopted as a council. It's not unusual for council procedure in any city. So the mayor is the one who determines the action we can take, but I would be willing to receive, if you want to, reduce your comments to a written document as other people can submit before a meeting. It's the mayor's prerogative if he wants to allow that.
If I submit something to you now, will you read it when it comes up as an agenda item?
We read it ourselves as we read out comments, if the mayor would allow that, but it wouldn't be read out loud. That's not how the procedure works.
Can you cite a section in our city constitution where I don't have a right to speak right now?
It's a protocol that the council has established that we don't allow testimony or comment on items that are on the agenda for that particular evening.
Okay. Well, this is the second time I've been here to state an opinion, and both times I have been unable to speak. So I'm very disappointed.
Well, you were allowed, you did get notice of this because you came this evening, and you would have been allowed to submit something in writing, which I'm sorry that you didn't do that. It would have been nice to have had it here in advance.
It would have been very nice.
We
City of Edina, if you're watching this, take note. Thank you.
All right, if you want to sit down and pen something, give us your thoughts quickly. We'll consider it as we go through the agenda, when we get to that point in the agenda. All right, anyone else for community comment wants to comment on anything on the agenda other than what's, comment on anything for us to consider other than something that's on the agenda? Excuse me. All right. We're going to move on to reports and recommendations. And the first matter is Resolution 2012-111, accepting various donations.
So
Is there a
moved.
motion?
So moved.
We've got a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2012-111. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Donations this reporting period are to the Edina Arts Center, the Edina Fire Department, and the Edina Park Department. And those donors' names will be posted on the website. All right. The next matter in front of us is going to be presented. Is Lisa here? Jesse's going to make these presentations. All right, we have with us this evening Jessica Kingston, who is the chair of the Human Rights and Relations Commission.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. Thank you very much. We have a resolution which the Human Rights and Relations Commission has passed and is urging the City Council to adopt, which is to encourage voters to vote no on the voter amendment. We have a number of residents who vote via absentee or who vote same-day registration, in which this particular constitutional amendment is going to impact their ability as well as the current voting process today. We had submitted a resolution that was passed by the Human Rights and Relations Commission last month. Before you should be a newer version that has gone through some consultation, including with myself, and that is the one that we are actually asking the City Council to adopt this evening.
Questions for Ms. Kingston? Member Swenson?
I have questions for our city clerk. So when would you like me to ask
Let
those?
me go ahead and ask the city clerk. I've got to get a clarification on this resolution. I mean, the one that's in front of us on the dais is different from the one that was in the packet.
That is correct.
Which one was passed by the Human Rights and Relations Commission?
The one that's in the packet was passed by Human Rights and Relations Commission. And then there is a new one that has gone through another iteration that encompasses the items that the Human Rights and Relations Commission passed. It covers, in essence, the spirit of that.
So this
And-
one that's on the dais wasn't passed by the Human Rights and Relations Commission? It's in our, the one in the packet was passed by the Human Rights and Relations Commission?
Yeah.
But the one that you're asking us to adopt is the one that's sitting on the dais that the Human Rights and Relations Commission did not pass?
Correct. They have not seen it. I have seen that and have worked on that.
Okay. All right, Member Bennett.
Yes, Your Honor, if I might. There were, I believe that the Human Rights and Relations Commission was working very diligently on this. There were a couple of issues with particularly one of the items. There was some data cited from a study, and actually there were several corrections to that paragraph. And then there also was a memo that HRRC member Russ Stanton wrote that expressed clarification on several items, but wasn't actually in the language of the resolution itself. So in consultation with HRRC Chair Kingston, I worked on this, and the language before you is language that I have submitted with opportunity for Ms. Kingston to review it. I also did send it to Lisa Schaefer and also did send it to City Clerk Mangan. And that language, following from the top, it states the language, the first paragraph, the first whereas, is the language that will be on the ballot. The second whereas is the actual constitutional amendment. The next several items are terms that are used in the actual constitutional amendment that are not defined and that will not be defined until enacting legislation is passed and administrative rules developed. The next couple of whereases are identification of what costs will be borne by taxpayers, whether those taxpayers are the taxpayers of Minnesota or the property taxpayers of the city of Edina. Then there is a whereas paragraph that identifies the number of Edina citizens who voted in the last general election, 31,512 in the 2008 last general presidential election. Of those, 3,763, or 10%, registered to vote on election day, and 7,316, or 23% of all those voted by absentee ballot. Because of the language of the proposed amendment, of the actual amendment, there will be an end to election day registration as it currently exists, with the creation of a provisional voting system, which does not currently exist in the state of Minnesota, and the rules for that have not been yet created. They would be created by enacting legislation. For instance, how many days does a voter have to verify their identity? That is not known at this time, and the expenses related to that system cannot be known at this time. It just can be known that there will be expenses. Then there is a whereas that identifies people most likely to be affected by this, and that ends the resolution. So it does, I believe, track the spirit and intent of what was submitted as a recommendation by the Human Rights and Relations Commission, because of course they have the authority to make recommendation to the council, but not actually to pass a resolution binding the city. So I believe that it captures that spirit, it captures that intent. I believe that it fulfills one of the charges of this body, which is to inform the citizens of this city, and I believe it also demonstrates what I believe is most significant about this in its local nexus, which is increased costs of a core government service of election administration, and also impact on our citizens, our eligible voting citizens.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, Member Stanton was pretty instrumental in drafting the original resolution and has seen the revision and is also in support of the revised resolution in front of you.
Thank you. Member Swenson, you had a question for Clerk Mangan?
Yes. Clerk Mangan, you're the one in our city who takes care of all the things that go around in elections. I I know this would be fairly difficult to ask you, but do you have any concept of what this is going to cost you in dollars, or at least could you give me some sort of ballpark of number of people that you might potentially need in addition to what you currently do?
Mayor and council, anything is purely speculative because there has been no enacting legislation, so we
Correct.
don't really know.
But that's
At a very minimum,
yeah.
I would guess that we would need to have an additional 15 to 30 minutes of training during an action. I mean, right now, we are required to provide a 2-hour statutory training. We would have to lengthen that to teach a new process. I, at a very minimum, would put another 2 judges in every polling location, because we would have to, in effect, create a separate system. If you came into the system and you were voting with the proper identification, you would go through the normal process. However, if you were a provisional voter, you would have another process to follow, and we would have to keep that as a separate process. So 40 additional judges. My average cost per hour is $10. That would bring me from 350 judges to approximately 390 judges. And a burden rate is about $10 an hour, so at about $3,900. Half an hour additional would be around $1,850. We would have to purchase some sort of ballot receptacle. And keep in mind, we wouldn't just purchase it, we would have to store it, we would have to transport it. We would have to develop some sort of security system for the uncounted provisional ballots once they're back in City Hall. Because these ballots have not been counted. We would have to have a process where we would staff the office so that persons that were able to certify their identification could come in for whatever that incremental period of time is. I don't know if that would be required for us to be open later in the evening, if it would require weekend hours, that's unknown. Then there would have to be some methodology of counting the provisional ballots once they are certified. We would also have to have some methodology of merging the data from election day data till the provisional voting data. Those results would have to be merged in. There quite frankly could be some delay in results from election night. So all of those things would have a cost factor. What that incremental cost is, it would just be a guess.
So that's the people that come to vote at our regular polling places on election day. Give me some idea of what happens to someone who wants to vote absentee, and how do you request a ballot if you aren't there with your identification? I'm a little confused about how that would work, and we have 23% absentee voters. Do most of them come in to get their ballots, or are you mailing out a portion of these?
At this time, approximately about 50% of the people come in person that vote absentee, and about 50% of them are mail-outs.
Okay.
So you would have about 3,500 people, 3,600 people that would be voting via mail. I don't know, because there is no definition in the constitutional amendment and there is no enacting legislation. I don't know what it would entail, if they would have to send in a copy of an ID. I don't know.
And tell me, in your personal experience working with balloting in the city of Edina, have we had any fraud in our voting?
Fraud or voter impersonation?
Well, voter impersonation, because I know that this bill doesn't cover a felon voting because ID doesn't say you're a felon. So do we have any proven cases of fraud?
To my knowledge, I have not had to get anything that has been prosecuted. After every election, the voting history is done at Hennepin County, and each time there are records that we are asked to produce.
Sure.
And to my knowledge, in the 17 years I've been here, no one has been prosecuted for fraud.
Thank you.
a footnote to that, as far as I know from the League of Women Voters data, is that there's never been a conviction in the entire state for voter impersonation. That's what it says on the site, so that might be incorrect. You're shaking your head. But in any case, it's,
I think there have been, I think there's been 119 proven cases of voter fraud. They're not necessarily, they're not necessarily impersonation, but there have been cases of voter fraud prosecuted, and that has been in about the last 10 years.
One of the costs I was curious about was you have 40 additional judges that would help with provisional voting. You said the training cost would be $1,850. What about their on-site presence? I take it that's again a $10 an hour issue in the typical.
Typically, we pay each judge for about 18 hours.
18 hours?
About 18 hours, so to do it in my head, it would be a little less, between $7,500 and $8,000.
I have a question, Mayor.
Sure. So it's
for the clerk. So we have, I don't know, 30% of our demographic is over 65. I'm probably wrong on that, but it's close.
I think it's like 24, 25.
25%. So for the elderly person that doesn't have a government-issued ID, because they've been registered for so many years and they don't, maybe they're not driving anymore or don't have an ID, what process would they have to go through in order to vote?
I can't answer that because there's no legislation, so I don't know what will be enacted. They would have to have some process whereby the constitutional amendment would guarantee free identification given by the state to persons who do not currently have identification.
But, so they'd have to go to the county, bring their other documents forward to get the voting ID.
That is correct.
And then, okay.
Because government-issued ID has not been legally defined, so we don't know what identification would be acceptable.
And if on the day of voting, they have a government-issued ID and their address has changed, they cannot vote?
That is correct.
How do you deal with voters now that come in without any identification?
Mayor and council, there are a list of identifications that is acceptable in the election laws that exist today. There is standalone documentation. The best and easiest is a driver's license, Minnesota state identification card, or a learner's permit, all showing the proper identification, proper address in the precinct. Barring that, there's kind of a laundry list, one from column A and one from column B. It would have to be an unexpired Minnesota driver's license, Minnesota ID, or Minnesota learner's permit, a military pass, a military ID, or a passport used in conjunction with a utility bill that shows the voter's name and address in the precinct. That also includes a lease that calls out the utility usage. And the utility bills could be telephone, garbage, cable television, electric, water, sewer, natural gas. Barring that, there is a process whereby today someone may have a registered voter of the same precinct who is already registered vouch for them.
What percent of the time, if you know, do we have voters that come in to vote on election day that don't have a picture ID that are going to be able to vote through one of these other processes? Do we have any sense of that?
Your Honor, and Mayor and Council, I would turn to Ms. Kingston and Member Brindle, who have both served as chairs because they have more feet on the ground in the precincts than I do. But I would say 10 to 15% of the people that register to vote using a one from column A and a one from column B. Does that seem fair?
Member Brindle, you are an election judge when you're not
When I'm not on the
running
ballot.
yourself. Tell us about your experience.
Well, my experience at Precinct 10 is that of the 1,600 or so voters in that precinct, there are a handful who present their photo ID just because that's how they're going to show us their address. And but most everybody comes in. The beauty of, I guess, being part of that precinct is that I know a lot of those people. But nonetheless, most come in and we have the roster in front of us and they say, "Hi, my name is Mary Brindle. I'm here to vote." And they find my name in the book, and before they open the book, they ask me for my address, so they can verify that the information I am giving them matches what is in the roster. That really takes the place right now, the way things are done, of having that picture ID. So that's really, I mean, it's very few people who come in and present the picture ID. I can't even venture a guess as to how many have a picture ID on them at the time. I would imagine nearly all of them do.
That's the sequence for someone who's an established voter.
Mm-hmm.
What about same-day registrants? What do they typically come in with in your experience with?
Typically, they come in with a picture ID. I think it's very, very rare, if ever, that they've come in with no picture ID. It's quite typical that they're a new resident. I may be forgetting, but they may be a new resident, so the address on their driver's license, it doesn't match the address that they are living at. So then they are asked for the other documentation, a mortgage statement, a gas bill.
Not a mortgage statement.
Yes, not a mortgage statement, that's
Water
true.
bill.
Water bill, cable bill, utility bill, and, but something official with the address, their name and the address on it.
Do we have any sense, Clerk Mangan, what % of people that same-day voter register use a vouching system or some other method other than a picture ID in our community to be able to vote?
I think it's pretty minimal in Edina. I would say that if we have 3 to 5 per precinct, I would say that's probably it, where we predominantly use it, and it's in our healthcare voting. Because someone that's in a nursing home and in assisted livings, the employees of those facilities may vouch for the voters, because those people typically no longer have identification.
Member Sprague?
So for the college students coming home, what do they usually use? Are they using student IDs and another method? I suppose that's one from A and one from B. And if how would that change with the amendment?
Again, there's no enacting legislation. So if it was a state college, then perhaps, but if it was a private college, I don't believe under the constitutional amendment that state or government issued ID would include private college identification cards.
Right now, those kids can show their college ID plus another residency document, and then
Students, under current Minnesota law, students have a unique thing. Using their student identification and a fee statement, they may register. Right. But that perhaps will change. Well, it will change, because that's not called out in the constitutional amendment.
Other questions for Clerk Mangan? Member Bennett, thank you for doing this work. I wanted to just read through some of the language because it was different from what we'd seen before. And I think the comments of Ms. Wolf, actually she was concerned about the Brennan Center for Justice data, and that's of course been removed from the resolution that you crafted because of some, I'm looking at Mr. Stanton and Ms. Wolf, some question about the validity of that data.
Well, no, Your Honor, the Brennan Center, it was a study that was actually done in 2006. It was sponsored by the Brennan Center, not done by the Brennan Center. And I thought that the local information, I do think the local connection is the most powerful, and I think the local numbers speak for themselves. 1/3 of the voters in the last presidential election having voted either by absentee ballot or registering at the polls on election day. So there is no reference to the Brennan Center or any data coming from that center in the current resolution. It's local data.
One thing, though, that I liked from the original resolution was the first line, because to me that kind of gets at the heart of the matter. This is not just about cost, it's about how it affects the ability of our residents to vote freely and fairly. And so I like the language of the first whereas in the original, and would like to maybe see that start the next one so we can frame the issue in terms of the fundamental right that's being restricted with this constitutional amendment.
Sure, there is a reference. The third to the last whereas does reiterate that voting is a fundamental civil right. If it's the council's desire to use the whereas from the previous draft, from the Human Rights and Relations Commission's draft, then I would urge that the words qualified electors be revised to citizens the first time and eligible voters the second time, because qualified electors actually has a meaning that is not people participating in an election. It's actually people participating in the presidential election as electors of their state.
With that language change, then you would strike the other whereas on the back as redundant, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, I've got another question for council members as I've listened to Clerk Mangan. If you go to the last whereas clause on page 1, it doesn't seem to me that the amendment would necessarily end election day registration. It could have the effect of limiting election day registration, as we know it, and create unknown difficulties for eligible voters who will vote absentee. So I was wondering if we should think about modifying that language. And then also at the top of page 2, the use of the word would and substitute the use of the word could, dealing more in terms of potentialities for the...
Your Honor.
And Member Bennett, I'm sure, willing to listen to your comments.
Well, I think that has actually been identified on a state level as well as on a federal level in terms of who has different types of ID. And for instance, Member Sprague referred to students. Up to 18% of adults, young adults aged 18 to 24, have photo ID, but that ID does not contain their current valid address or their current legal name. You have people entering into marriages, they're still using an old driver's license. As Member Brindle pointed out, often people will come to a polling place with a photo ID with their previous address. And my own late mother moved 3 times in the last 9 months of her life. So in that way, we do know that people who are moving frequently, people who are going into healthcare facilities, people who are students, in terms of the military personnel, that's again because so many questions have been raised about absentee voting that are raised by the language of the amendment and not answered by the language of the amendment. And then finally, the poor or low-income people, the reason, although the state would be required to furnish these IDs at no cost to the recipient, the cost would be to the taxpayers. The cost of the underlying documentation that's required to obtain them would be a cost of the voter. And we know from states in which this has been implemented that time taken from work to travel to obtain the documents, the cost of the documents themselves, the cost of a certified copy of a birth certificate being close to $30. If a person has changed their name with marriage, then they need also to have a certified copy of their birth certificate in order to have their valid name. And Your Honor, you and I think were reminded that we're of a generation that often has baby boy Hovland or baby girl Kelly on their birth certificates, and then that requires a trip to court, which could be up to $300 in legal fees to have one's current legal first name placed on one's birth birth certificate. So for those reasons, I think that's not speculative. It's identification of those who actually will bear those costs.
So what about if we said that they would be most likely to be affected?
Be most likely affected?
Most likely affected, or most likely to be affected, and maybe you'd have low-income residents in there. I'm trying to think of situations that will apply to Edina. The other thing that I'm wondering if we should at least talk about is if we're interested in this type of a resolution. You know, we've heard our clerk talk about the costs that are going to be borne by the city of Edina. That's not referenced in here. And also, we've never had any proven case of voter fraud in Edina. That's not mentioned in the resolution either. I don't know if my colleagues think those are important.
I think those are all the underlying reasons that we're discussing it here tonight. And to try to put down absolutely every reason that we're concerned about what this might do for our residents and for the cost to our city would be very difficult. I do think that this amendment does end Election Day registration because it makes provisional balloting, which to me that's not registration. So I think I'm fine with that term staying there. You know, anecdotally, we can discuss a lot of different situations that affect our neighbors and our residents to keep them from being able to vote easily or at all. But I don't think we can embody them in the whole resolution. I think they're just the reason that we're discussing it.
But to the mayor's point, whereas 3 talks about there's been no evidence of voter impersonation, which is the only fraud that could be cured by the imposition of a state-issued ID program. And to me, that's also fundamentally at the heart of this. If you're going to impinge upon the most fundamental right we have, the very essence of the infrastructure of democracy, the right to vote, you want to use, a limited measure. And here, with all these consequences, creating the barriers to the voters, especially some of the more vulnerable groups, and the costs, without any proven fraud that's going to be corrected, I mean, that is an integral fact that we should include.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there should be a compelling reason if you're going to do something like this. And what you've got here basically is a solution in search of a problem. The problem doesn't exist. And so you've got a situation where we could have some of our residents adversely affected. It's an expense we don't need to bear. And personally, I don't like the idea of cluttering up our state constitution with something like this. So it's just a matter of getting the language the way it should be.
So back to how we were drafting this, what I was suggesting was to include the first whereas with the edits from Member Bennett, and then right under that, I would put the one I just mentioned, whereas Minnesota enjoys one of the best election systems. Then you frame it up, both in terms of the fundamental right and that there really is no problem identified. And then go through the rest of it with a removal of the redundant phrase on the back that references the right to vote.
If I might respond, Your Honor, to your question about costs, that is a big question. In every state that has been implemented, there have been costs. There were costs identified at the legislature when it was proposing this in the form of a bill, a legislative bill, and the costs have varied, I think, between $30-some million and $68 million to implement on a state level without it being known what portion of those will be borne by the state of Minnesota and what will be borne by the local communities or the property taxpayers. And that's why I used the term taxpayers, because we know that those costs will be borne by the taxpayers. We just can't identify at this point which taxpayers are going to be bearing those costs.
So let me go back to that Member Sprague's comments. Member Sprague, you like, out of the original resolution that was passed by HRRC, you like whereas clause number 1 and whereas clause number
3.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then with-
And how was it, Member Bennett, that you wanted to modify the first whereas clause that Member Sprague mentioned?
That
Voting is both
the
a constitutionally protected right and the civil responsibility of all
citizens.
citizens. Yeah.
And the ability of eligible voters to cast their votes in free and fair elections is the or a cornerstone of American democracy.
Amen.
All right, so it's those two, no one seemed uncomfortable, or no one seemed to embrace these issues that I raised. So what I hear people saying is that we move that first whereas clause from the original resolution passed by HRRC to lead out the resolution that we have in front of us, and then follow that with the third clause from the original HRRC resolution as the second whereas provision?
That's correct.
With a couple of minor changes that I would suggest. First of all, where it says state issued, government issued is the term that photo identification. So those words should be the words in the last line, the third line. So
strike the words a state and just say government issued.
Government issued photo identification program.
Yep.
And then in line 2, after evidence, strike the words between the brackets. There has been no evidence of voter impersonation, which is the only type of fraud. So, and the rest of the whereas. So the whereas would read, whereas Minnesota enjoys one of the best election systems in the United States, and there has been no evidence of voter impersonation, which is the only type of fraud that could be cured by the imposition of a government-issued photo identification program.
Member Sprague?
So moved.
Okay, we've got a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Further discussion?
Yes.
Member Brindle?
With respect to the members of Human Rights and Relations, we've got a little bit of time here before the election. Is there a reason to send this back, to have HRRC vote on this?
Well, if we were to go back and re-vote on it and then come back again, I think the timing of getting back on the council agenda is going to be later in October, and we won't have enough time to get this out to the public. And the intent is to educate the public as much as possible about this amendment before the election happens in November.
All right, so if I will take your advice. I just wanted to make sure to say that we appreciate all the time and the time, effort, and what's the word I want? The need for us to get this in front of our public and join as a community.
Well, thank you
on
very
this
much.
issue. All right, thank you.
All right, Manager Neal.
I was going to make similar comments to Chair Kingston, that your next two council meeting agendas are really full, and this one was not. So this was going to work out pretty well for everyone to have this kind of detailed policy discussion tonight, but October 2nd and 16th would probably not work out very well for it.
All right, Member Bennett?
Member Sprague, as your second, would you accept a friendly amendment to delete also the second to the last whereas as being redundant with the addition of the third whereas from the previous?
Yes, I accept that.
All right.
All right, is there a second? We got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed say nay. Carried. All right, I think
Do you need a
Clerk
vote?
Mangan, do you know?
I think I have it, sir.
Did we vote on the main motion?
No,
yet.
Okay.
that was on the amendment. Now we have to
All
vote
right,
on.
now, all those in favor of the resolution as modified, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Carried.
I would like to just point out for Betsy, thank you, Betsy, for coming to want to talk about this tonight. One thing that you referenced was that the final whereas should say now, it should say whereas the City Council of the City of Edina. And I just want you to know that the way this resolution closes is it says, now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Edina. So that kind of pulls in that other thing that you wanted, so thank you.
All right, we've got another proposed resolution from the Human Rights and Relations Commission dealing with what we all basically know as Citizens United case. Go ahead and state the HRRC's position on this matter, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. We had a resident who brought this topic forward and had met with HRRC. We have adopted a resolution at HRRC that we are bringing forward to the City Council to consider and discuss, and that is what is before you this evening.
All right. Comments on this proposed resolution? Ms. Benson?
While personally I might not like the Citizens United decision, I don't see the direct implications for our residents that I saw in the previous one, so I would move to table this.
I will second.
I also want to say as part of discussion, the jurisprudence on corporations as individuals and the fight about that, it stretches 100 years back. This is not a new fight. Unfortunately, the recent decision implicates something that's, I think, near and dear to many people's heart, the integrity of elections, and that's why it's come forward, and I appreciate the intent. But I also don't, I don't see the nexus direct enough to get involved in this federal question of jurisprudence.
The only question I would have is, what were some of the reasons behind wanting to push this forward by the resident?
Yeah, the resident has been heavily involved in bringing this topic to the public and having conversations with people, and certainly not in favor of saying, especially in an election year, to have corporations be influencing those types of elections, that it should be done by the people. They should be able to make those decisions and do the donations themselves and not have them coming through from other parties. And so really wanting to keep it more at a fair state.
Member Bennett.
If I may, I am very comfortable with a motion to table. I do feel like disclosure, to me, disclosure is the key element. That's not what's before us in a resolution, and so that disclosure and that accountability, I would like to see further developed, but also I don't see either the urgency or the local connection that I see with the voter ID issue.
Disclosure in terms of who's providing the funding?
Yes, exactly. And I think as a state, Minnesota has historically had very good rules on disclosure, as have had other states, and I think that's one of the concerns. But I have not done the study that my colleague has done on this issue, but I know that there's also been a long history with this, and it's a very complicated legal issue with ramifications to constitutional amendment.
I concur with the other lawyers, I guess, here, that I went to a presentation at Good Samaritan Church about a month ago on the Citizens United case. I think you raised a great point about we ought to know who's providing the funding for particular issues or candidates. I think that's all part of the transparency that we should all be seeking. But I left that meeting perplexed as to whether it even had any local applicability. I haven't read the Citizens United case. I don't know if it would apply to a local election or not. And I frankly wasn't satisfied when the speaker had to answer questions as to whether or not he adequately satisfied my curiosity as to the rights of corporations relative to free speech. So I didn't feel he stood up very well under the examination that some of our residents gave him. Okay. One of whom wrote to us after that session in a very articulate way and expressed his concerns about what he had seen or what he had heard. So I just think it's right now it's a quagmire, and I don't want to get involved in it, and I like the idea of tabling it. In fact,
if you want to do some interesting,
tabling it for what purpose? Tabling it for what?
I think that's the format for now. If you want to do some interesting reading, just do the research on corporate personhood and the Bill of Rights and the 14th Amendment, and it'll keep you involved for hours and hours and hours.
So, all right, we got a motion to table indefinitely in a second. We've had some discussion on this matter. All those in favor of tabling this matter indefinitely say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, or Ms. Chair, I should say. And also, congratulations, once you walk back up here so people can see you on television. And tell us what your new job is going to be.
I am going to be the Director of the Department of Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity for the City of St. Paul.
And the acronym?
HERO.
HERO.
Yeah.
So we're sending an Edina hero to St. Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now, somewhere in here I have my agenda. And we are up to correspondence and petitions. Anything other than what we had on the dais this evening? Manager Neal, anything else that you need to bring to our attention? Okay. I think we need a motion to receive the petitions from Dewtown regarding the community gardens. Is there a motion to receive those petitions?
Second.
Moved and seconded, we received the petitions from Dewtown regarding community gardens. Discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Mayor and council comments. Member Sprague.
Ooh, thank you. Well, I went on a trip to New York with my 6-year-old, New York City, the Big Apple. And one of our first stops was at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. The museum's actually not quite built. So I wanted to show you some photos from that because it's a pretty spectacular memorial. So I'm going to wait for those to come up.
And I want you to know I called him on a city matter, and he answered in the middle, and I could hear the water behind
From the
him.
memorial, from the 30-foot waterfall. It was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the preview site. This is on Vesey or Vesey Street. I actually worked next door law clerking in a building when I was going to law school there. So it was close, a location I knew very well. But this is where you go to pick up your tickets. If you go to the next slide, you can see they have slides of the event and of the memorial site and some other interesting objects that are inside this. I guess it's kind of the mini museum for right now. Then you wind around blocks and blocks to get to the memorial ponds. In the background there is the new Freedom Tower. I think it's World Trade 1. It's going to be symbolically and literally 1,776 square feet, so 1776 tall, which is about 101 stories. And I think they just completed the 100th floor, is what I saw as I was looking at some stuff online. Yep. And as you walk into the memorial site, there's this beautiful plaza with trees, and there's somewhere on the site is like a tree from the original site that was moved somewhere else. After the event, it lost almost the entire trunk, but there was a stub. They moved the stub regrew, and then they transplanted it back to the site. So it's called the survivor tree. It's somewhere within the midst here. It's just an absolutely beautiful plaza. And then you move on, there's 2 memorial pools, and you'll see at the bottom they have names of the victims. There were about 3,000 in all, 2,600 from the buildings, and then about 400 first responders. 30-foot waterfall all the way around that drains into this void in the middle. And and both of the pools are the exact foundation size of the 2 buildings that were brought to the ground. And then you'll notice as you walk around both pools, they have the groups of of people that deceased. Here we see Flight 77, and that's the names of some of the passengers on that airline. And then this is a view back towards the Freedom Tower over the site. And then as you go across the street, so now you weave your way back out, you're walking down Broadway, and there's this bronze memorial to the first responders. It's absolutely beautiful. And then right next to it is, that's a framed, kind of a picture of all the first responders that died in the incident. So an incredible experience. It was very moving to be there. And as Member Swenson said, she called me and got to hear the waterfall. It's just an amazing thing. It opened on the 10th anniversary of 9/11 back last year, and it's always packed with people. So I did bring back on site. They have some wonderful brochures on the memorial, which also kind of show you the layout and talk about the incident and so on. And so I brought those back for council members and Manager Neal to peruse in your free time. The other thing I had was with respect to the variance that we issued, that application on Schaefer Road. In the correspondence from the appellant, she talked about not getting her written notice into the Planning Commission. And I know that we have protocol for people sending in comments, written comments, so I just wanted to clarify. Planner Teague's not here, so I'm not going to get that clarification. But maybe someone can follow up and just make sure that we're following the proper protocol. She also was concerned about adequate time. I know that is set by ordinance. I think it's a 10-day notice for a variance. She was on a 2-week vacation. You know, that will happen. And also that she didn't receive full information, a full packet. So let's just follow up on that, and maybe someone can get back to her so that we can ensure that we're following the right procedure there. Thanks.
Thanks. Member Swenson.
No, nothing tonight.
Thank you. Member Bennett.
Thank you. I attended the third and last Name Your Neighborhood meeting, and congratulate Assistant Manager Kurt on leading a really, really nice process, and also Manager Intern Ari Klugman, who has been, I think, an essential part of this as well, and all the committee members who are working very hard. They had a good turnout, and I think received a good number of comments. I'm really encouraged by the young girl who's been coming to all the meetings, and know that we'll be seeing more of her. And the council has received some correspondence this week that I think does a good job of capturing the range, some of the range of comment that was delivered. And I look forward to seeing more information come forward from that process. I think it's been a really good process. I think everyone's worked hard, and I really like the direction it's moving. Also am reminding people about the Quasqui Centennial Kickoff on October 4 from 5 to 7:30 p.m. They need to know how much sandwich loaf to order. And so if you have not yet RSVP'd but do plan to attend, please call City Receptionist or Marcy Matson at the Historical Society. But the receptionist is taking reservations. Also, people in community groups, churches, schools who may not have received an invitation, if somehow we missed you on the list, please contact the city. This will be at Braemar, but hoping for a good kickoff to the 2013 Quasqui Centennial events.
Thank you. Member Brindle.
All right. I have 3 on September 11th. Is that when you were in New York?
I was there shortly after.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, on Tuesday, September 11th, the Southwest Beyond the Yellow Ribbon Coalition had its kickoff. And by kickoff, what I mean is a public event, inviting the public in to learn about what Beyond the Yellow Ribbon is and what we're doing in our communities to form this new multi-city chapter. And I have a feeling that by the time we finish this action plan, which the National Guard estimates will take us a year, it may look a little different than the way we started. But nonetheless, the cities of Edina, Hopkins, St. Louis Park, and Minnetonka are very engaged. The cities of Wayzata and Excelsior are not yet as engaged as those first four. But we had about 75, well, actually, we have about 75 people who signed up to volunteer in the various areas. And that was basically the reason for the kickoff, was to say, this is what we're doing, and this is what we need you to do, because it really is a community effort to support our military and our communities. There is a lot that can be said about the support that is needed and how Minnesota is different than some other states and how military personnel live in our state. And I could take a great deal of time and describe all of that, but suffice to say that we had some wonderful partners help us with the kickoff. The Lions Clubs of Hopkins and Edina served walking tacos. Our event started at 5:30, so we had some nibbles for people to have, being that it was at the dinner hour. And Think Mutual Bank was a partner, and they went and purchased dilly bars, so everybody had dilly bars at the end. So we added some fun to an event. Annette Kuiper, who has a connection to the Edina Police Department, was our keynote speaker. And she just kind of helped frame the whole process. And a very meaningful part of that event was an award awarded to the Edina Police Department in the city of Edina. The employer's support for Guard and Reserve is part of, it's an adjunct to the National Guard. And when a deployed person leaves their place of employment to go and serve, it happens sometimes that employers go above and beyond. Sometimes the deployed person does not make as much money in a military role as they have made in their employment role. And that occurred with one of our employees, and Kevin Raffadal. And so what happened was the city of Edina then covered the gap. So where he needed that extra money that he wasn't making from the military to keep up on his bills and his mortgage and life at home for his family, the city of Edina, as his employer, stepped up and filled that gap. And so it was in that spirit that Kevin turned around and nominated the city of Edina for this prestigious award. And I believe it was mentioned that there were 10 companies in the United States that received this award, and City of Edina was one of them. So thank you, Kevin, for your service. Thank you for your insight in recognizing your employer and the efforts of your employer, the City of Edina, to recognize really Kevin's outstanding service as an employee as well as a military person. So that was a very special presentation made at that kickoff. Then, just the other day, I attended with Manager Houle, Director Houle, the Hennepin County Bike Advisory Council, which met upstairs in the community room. And this is a group of bicycle enthusiasts, each representing a Hennepin County commissioner. So each introduces themselves and says, I represent such and such commissioner. So talking about the issues related to safe bicycling in our cities. And we had the opportunity to talk about the Transit for Livable Communities, the bike route that is being laid right now in our community, as well as how far we've come since 20 years ago or so, when bicycling and options to add bike lanes and include bike routes in our community was really not something that was entertained by the city council. So we're noticed. We're noticed by some of the other commissioners on this council, particularly one gentleman from Minneapolis who said, I want to know how you did this, because he's got a segment that he would like to have treated as we've been able to do here. And then finally, on a biking note, Tour de Edina, coming up on October 14th at noon, meeting in the 69th and France corner of, 69th and France corner of the Southdale parking lot, community bike ride. For information, go to tourdeedina.org. We'd love to have you.
Thank you. Well, I have to tell you that Manager Neal and I were at the Beyond the Yellow Ribbon kickoff event, and Member Brindle did a great job of, she wasn't technically the MC, but you could see her fingerprints all over everything and making it function properly. Denny Schulstead was the MC, our own retired Brigadier General Denny Schulstead. He did a fabulous job. Yeah. And one of the things that I found most interesting in that presentation about Beyond the Yellow Ribbon, which started in Minnesota, in providing support for families of Guard members and reservists that are deployed overseas. They have had enough of an experience doing this now where they know that these guys and women that are deployed, when they come home, the adjustment is easier when they get back home, because they know their families have been taken care of. And there's a real psychological edge in being able to readjust quicker into society for these folks. So they're trying to spread this concept all across the country, and I think it's a great notion. I didn't get there in time for dinner. I wasn't going to eat any taco that could walk around. So anyway, wouldn't touch a walking taco. The day after our last council meeting, we had a Southwest LRT Management Committee meeting. Things are moving along well there. We got a $2 million grant. You remember the Department of Employment and Economic Development was given $47 million I think in the bonding bill, and they were charged with trying to figure out what to do with it. And so the test they adopted was, what kinds of jobs are going to be created off this money that we have to disperse, and they went about that in a real methodical way. I think the big grant was for that new baseball park in St. Paul, but beyond that, they had some expenditures that weren't too significant that will have a great consequence in some of the communities that they're doing work in on a public-private partnership basis. Really, really quite well done. And I heard more about that at the panel discussion we had for 169, Will Schroyer from the Chamber talking about transit, Tim Henkel from MnDOT, and then Mark Phillips, the Commissioner of Deed, talking about the process they went through in deciding how they were going to spend that $47 million on a job creation basis.
Was the Southwest LRT, didn't they do an application for preliminary engineering?
They did, and the preliminary engineering, we're in preliminary engineering. It's a $95 million contract. I don't think they have the lead engineering firm picked yet, but they're setting up shop and getting ready to roll.
So they didn't get funded out of the deed pool. They got
just a minor amount of the money they needed out of the deed pool, but there was money enough to get going out of the CTIB pool, and then out of the CTIB pool, and maybe the county, because the federal government comes in at the back end and reimburses. So eventually, when that line gets built, the $1.2 billion line, half of it will come through federal funds, 30% from CTIB money, which is the 5 counties, 10% from the host county, and 10% from the state. But you remember that the legislature demurred on giving the $25 million that they were supposed to contribute to preliminary engineering, and so we got $2 million of it back through the deed grant, but that's a far cry from the 25 that was needed. But nonetheless, there's enough to go forward.
So the 2 million, then you cobble together additional pots of money for a total of what for preliminary engineering?
I think it is about $95 million, I think,
Okay.
total. So, spent over about a 2 or 3 year period. On the 6th, I went over to a dinner at Walker. Dr. Adnan Qureshi, who's on our Community Health Committee, started the World Congress of Interventional Cardiologists, and I went over there to give a greeting to all these cardiologists from all over the world. That was a pretty interesting experience, and met some interesting folks from Turkey and where else? They were from India, Africa, France, Brazil, but some interesting conversations, especially with the Turks that were, taking in all these refugees from Syria and having these doctors talk about the burden that's being placed on Turkey by having 100,000 Syrians kind of blended into the community, and all the financial burden on Turkey. No help from the UN. It's pretty amazing. On the 10th, morning of the 10th, which was Monday, I spoke at the North Central States Real Estate Forum. They had three of us speak about what's happening in the Southdale area. It was Joel Nowak from Galleria, Lori Van Dalen from Southdale, and then me from the city. And that was an interesting experience, talking about what's happened in Southdale and how we were a partner with them on maximizing their remodeling. A couple of people have passed away in the last 2 weeks that are longtime Edina residents. I went to 2 funerals, one for Lee Hoopmacher, and then just on the 17th, on Monday, Marsh Everson, both, 3 generations of families in our town. Hoopmacher, of course, the grandfather of those Rawless boys that are such good football players over at the U, and then Marsh Everson, the grandfather of those 2 Everson boys that are playing hockey at Harvard. So really some terrific families, and sad, but nice to see all those people. Member Bennett covered for us over at the open space lot at Linden Littell. We were supposed to meet there at 4, and then somebody said 6, so I showed up at 6, and everybody met at 4. So I had to kind of walk around the neighborhood to find out what happened. I didn't get a chance to talk to you. I don't know if you'd want to report out on that quickly as to the upshot of what's going to happen over there in terms of restoration of the property.
Well, I can report on the meeting and then turn to Manager Neal or Director Houle to answer. Ross Bintner, the city's new environmental coordinator, and Director Houle were present, and probably about 6 or 7 residents, including the new homeowner, were present. And I understand there's also been a lot of correspondence and even some phone calls, some emails, some direct response to the letter that was sent out. And one of the women on the block is a landscape designer, and there was understanding gained during the meeting that the plan that's been on paper is what they call an immediate results plan, which can include, for instance, more spruce trees in a line than would be optimal going forward. It looks great now, but you're going to have to remove as they get bigger. So there was a contemplation that in terms of screening the wall, actually some fewer spruce trees would work as well as better in the long-term sustainable sense than what's designed. There was also discussion of how the space is used, which is largely beautiful green space, largely unmaintained. It's been a fairly natural area, but there is desire to be able to continue to use that. Also, children playing a sliding hill. There was concern about the placement of one of the trees. And so I don't know where it has gone since then, but I thought that both Mr. Bintner and Director Houle conducted a good meeting. Questions were asked about process. I think there was some concern that people who had weighed in by petition would have their opinions evaluated as much as people who had sent different emails. There was a question of sort of what in time counted, but I know that there's been a lot of return since Manager Neal sent a letter directly to residents and Mr. Bintner.
I think at this point, the process was that we had prepared a proposed plan. We asked people to comment on the proposed plan. We're still assembling comments, analyzing comments. at which point we'll try to respond to those comments and prepare a new plan, or maybe revise the existing plan somewhat, and go forward. We'd like to get something in the ground yet this year before we run out of planting season. That's the goal.
I think those were the two biggest concerns again, and takeaway from the meeting are, I think there is a lot of support for what's been on paper already, that I have seen expressed on paper and also then at that meeting, with modification, but definitely what's been shown and under discussion since July. And then the other element that occurs to people is because the city itself has paid when it has used residents' property for access to, for instance, build a sidewalk or something that serves city purpose, it's the perception, the strong belief of the neighbors of this project, the people on the block, that because public land was used for a private construction project without payment to the city, that it's fair to then ask the builder to restore the land at its cost.
Right. Okay, just two other quick things. Monday I went out in the evening for the program for the Abby's Hope event. You all remember Abby Taylor and the tragic death there, and her parents, Katie and Scott Taylor, have started a foundation, and this was their big annual fundraiser at our municipal golf course. It must have been close to 200 golfers in the event. It was just spectacular, really, and they had a big tent up out there, and had musical entertainment, a big silent auction and live auction, and I hope they did really well. Because they're doing some terrific work on swimming pool safety all across the country. And then yesterday I went to what I mentioned before, they're calling Reality Check 2.0, and that's we're working on an event that will kind of update the region on economic development and the progress over the past couple of years. So that's it for me. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. I've got a few things. Some are happy and unfortunately some are not. I'll start with one of the not, and that is I wanted to give you an update on what we are beginning to kind of come to grips with Golf Dome replacement. We met, some staff met with the construction manager from RJM, Brian Recker, on Tuesday, so just last week, or excuse me, just yesterday, and began to get really the impression that the Golf Dome replacement project is not proceeding nearly at the pace that we hoped it would. As you know, the fire was caused by either some mechanical equipment that was not installed correctly or some mechanical equipment that malfunctioned. But there was really quite a long process involved where we could not do anything with the site because of that dispute and the insurance carrier trying to reckon how they were going to settle out for the lawsuit that was between the two parties. That meant that we got a pretty late response. In fact, there are some aspects of the site that Traveler still hasn't released yet. What we found, or what we learned, I think, on Tuesday, is that our building official has declared the building itself to be part of the loss. Travelers has not reached that conclusion yet, so we really pressed that issue and had some inspections done, and that part of the project is also going to be removed because of the way that it was structurally damaged. It's not able to be rebuilt, in the opinion of our building inspector. So we have moved this project forward, and at this point, the estimate to replace that building, to replace the same scope of building from what we had to the future, is $2.6 million, which is going to exceed, I think, the best case scenario of what we're going to get in an insurance settlement. So it's very important at this point that we proceed very carefully to make sure that we don't put any part of this insurance settlement in any jeopardy. We have notified them that we are proceeding with the final site demolition and clearance. And we are now ready to sit down with them and negotiate the final settlement. And we've just been able to do that for about a week after RJM has come forward with their estimate of what it's going to cost to rebuild the same structure that we have. Like we did with the Hornet's Nest, we will be asking RJM to look at value engineering for this project. But we think it's important, and we think that we've not heard anything contradictory from the council, that we replace that project the same scope of what we had. So that's the plan at this point. We don't have plans that are suitable yet for bidding. We expect that RJM's involvement in this plan will yield a process that will feel a little disjointed to council members, in that we'll be bidding aspects of the construction in packages. So like, that's not unusual for a construction manager, but that's how this is intended to be done. Timelines for the project, some are lengthy, including one involving the purchase of the fabric, which is almost an $800,000 project, or almost an $800,000 expense in and of itself. It has a 10-week time frame between when it's ordered and when it's delivered. Turf is about a $350,000 expense, so just those two expenses alone are about $1 million of this project. The plan at this point is to use the existing foundation and build around that foundation, and that's the direction that we have given RJM, is to finish this design and to encourage and incent Cunningham to finish the design and design documents as soon as possible, including finishing them probably prior to when we will have finished our negotiations with Travelers on what the final settlement's going to be. So that's what I could tell you today. We do not have an updated timeline from RJM based on the meeting yesterday, but Ann Catry, who is kind of taking over this project as one of the major assignments that she's taking over on behalf of John, went to a meeting with RJM and Cunningham today. They're producing a new timeline that includes some of the phasing recommendations that we got from RJM just yesterday. And so we'll be sharing that with you as soon as we can.
So just to clarify, that was a long sentence. The foundation has now been ruled by our building inspector as needing replacement. So the project cost is
Building.
No, the building.
Oh, the building. Okay.
We're going to use the existing foundation.
Foundation, but the building structure above ground to which it was tethered before, he's now ruled to be insufficient.
Right. The ones structurally, one thing you will notice, and that is materially different from what we will rebuild compared to what was there, is how the building is connected to the fabric, to the dome. Before, that building, the fabric was kind of attached to the building, and as the fabric moved, the building moved occasionally. What we are designing is a more conventional project, in that there'll be a tunnel, so to speak, a walkway that will connect the building to the dome, and it'll be much more similar to what you see in existing kind of domed features right now.
And so that has moved the project cost up?
That aspect of it has not moved the timeline. What has delayed
project
our
cost.
timeline, that's one aspect that's pushed up the project timeline, but it's not delayed the timeline.
But that's moved the project cost up to
Yes.
2.7?
It's one of the aspects. Yeah.
Okay.
So what is the timeline?
I don't have
Roughly.
I don't have the timeline here today, but I can.
But I just saw a timeline a couple days ago, or last week. So is it,
Todd showed me an RJM timeline.
If he showed you an RJM timeline that
Must be
had
modifying
like a October, did it have like an October?
Yeah, it was an older
opening?
timeline.
Yeah, that we looked at that timeline yesterday and told them that was not acceptable.
Yeah, is there any way we're going to get this thing operational sometime this winter?
I do not believe so at this point.
What about all those guys that are trying to make a living out there? What are we going to do with them? And all the people in our community that want to use the dome? Yeah. It's really, Travelers, I feel like, has really
Travelers has
been poor to deal with, frankly.
They have some incentive, of course, to also move this forward. Apparently not as much as we do, but they have, they're on the hook for our business interruption insurance. So that money, we will continue to receive that money until the dome is replaced. But that's something they need to be considering as well. So we are ready to engage them, and we talked to Brian Recker about getting that done yet this month.
So additional revenue loss, if it's not built, would be covered by the business interruption?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's no comfort to the golfers that are going to miss that facility.
Right.
But that doesn't help us cover any of those golf pros that work out there in the wintertime. I mean, that was,
Right.
that's
Right.
just our lost revenue.
Right.
Not
That's
their
right.
income.
No.
Okay.
We're starting to receive our information back from Hennepin County about our values, our valuations. As you know, that process comes to the city, comes to cities in the late fall, and the valuation notices by law are mailed out to property owners after the election, so sometime in mid-November. What we know kind of on a gross basis is that our median single-family home valuation went down. Last year it was, this year it's $403,000. It went down in 2013, respectively, to $396,550, so 1.6% is the decrease. The median commercial property, however, increased by 1%. Our tax base, the biggest value in our tax base is the residential side, so it will have an impact on our total valuation.
Tax capacity wise, residential is what percentage? They tell us every year, but I know it shifts a little bit from year to year.
Yeah, if I had to give you an estimate, I'd say it's probably 2/3 in Edina and 2/3, 1/3.
I think it's higher.
It could be 75-25.
Where's John Wallen when you need a figure?
He's in Alexandria, Minnesota tonight at the Minnesota Government Finance Officers.
An event not to be missed, let me
Right.
tell you.
But as you and I were talking the other day, we are now we have the fourth highest number for tax base.
Our tax base, which we would typically refer to as our tax capacity. We have the fourth largest tax capacity in the state, only behind Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Bloomington. So ahead of Minnetonka, Plymouth, Rochester, Duluth, St. Cloud, et cetera. So, and if you start doing that number by square mile, it's pretty impressive. We have received, and maybe you've received too, questions about something from a company called HomeServe USA. It's an insurance that this group is trying to sell to residents, and I got this call from Dewey Hogland, who got this letter at home. It's an insurance coverage that this group is trying to sell you to cover the private side of the underground water and sewer utilities that serve your home. It's kind of goes in cycles, and there is evidently some marketing activities going on right now for this. Mr. Hogland asked us if we have any association, do we back it, do we support it, do we know anything about it? The answer is not really. They on the bottom of their letter they say HomeServe USA Repair Management is is an independent company separate from your local utility or community and offers this optional insurance, et cetera. So we don't have anything to do with this. We don't have any association with it. You know, we don't typically make a consumer protection judgment about these kind of things, but we don't have any reason to believe it's fraudulent, but it's just not something we're involved in.
But we have no idea in terms of like Better Business Bureau
No.
complaints or complaints with state attorneys general, so.
We don't.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we're just not commenting on it, but it is not something that we're engaged in. We are working to at least at some point begin to produce our council packet in an electronic format that's usable for everyone. That means that one of the hurdles in that process is the colored paper that we use. It doesn't come across right. It doesn't copy well. It doesn't scan well. So we're beginning to look at modifications to our packet protocol that will reduce the amount of colored paper that we use. And so you're going to begin to see some of those changes in our next council packet, so the October 2nd council packet. And one of those changes happens to be the request for purchase in excess of $20,000 or a change order. This is the new kind of template that you're going to see. We think the important thing that we hear from council members that you want to know is who's making this request? Is it in the budget or not in the budget? What is it that we're buying, and is there and what's the number, how much, what are the bids, and what the general information is. So all of that information, all the information you rely on to make your decisions will still be in here, but it will be on a sheet that's just differently formatted. So you'll begin to see that. Maybe some of the good news, and the mayor announced this or gave you a preview earlier tonight. Building permits. We budgeted for 2012 building permit revenue of $2.5 million. As of the end of August 31st, we were at $2.1 million. Given what we know that's kind of making its way through planning and that building inspectors have already reviewed, that's coming our way, we think at a minimum we're going to end the year at $3.2 million. And our record for the city was set in 2.6, and it was 3.5 million. And there is a chance, if some projects proceed on a faster pace, that we could eclipse that 3.5 million this year. So it's significant. Our building permit revenues, we are expecting for 2012 are going to be 20% higher than they were in 2011. And 2011 was 13% higher than they were in 2010. So things are happening here, and they're happening at a quick pace. And I think that's all I have for you, other than just a reminder that we did want to ask the council to reconvene the closed session so that we can
Just
pick
a moment
up.
here. I think Member Bennett has one.
That is, before we
adjourn.
adjourned, I wanted to thank the League of Women Voters, Edina Reads, the Edina Community Foundation, and everyone else who sponsored the discussion of Healing the Heart of Democracy. I know that many of us were able to attend. It's a really worthwhile book. It was a really worthwhile presentation and discussion, and recommend the book. And again, thanks to everyone who helped to produce it.
Okay. If there's nothing further, we will adjourn this meeting, and then we will reconvene momentarily in closed session. Meeting is adjourned.